And we're live. Hey everyone, welcome to Comic Artist Pro Secrets. This is Ethan Van Sciver. Really happy to have you tonight for a very surprise, sudden live chat. I just decided to do this today. I mean, I asked this gentleman if he wanted to come on. He's like, yeah, you know, whenever you want. I just feeling a little bit cheeky. I just kind of said, well, how about tonight? And he was open to it. So hooray, we have a really, really big guest. And his name is Chuck Dixon. So Chuck, say hello.
Hey, hello everybody.
All right, let me pull the live chat up here so we can see. All right, yeah, we've already got a ton of people in here. So Chuck, I'm really, really happy to talk to you. I mean, I've met you in person a few times, especially one time I remember vividly was back in Orlando, Florida at the FX show. We shared a table, and I really enjoyed your company. But for some reason, I don't get to see you in person very much. But let it be known, I like you an awful lot for many reasons. Not the least of which is the fact that you created Bane, and everyone in the whole world at this point knows that Bane is one of Batman's most important villains. Probably one of his most substantial and significant. I'm trying to think, is there a bigger Batman villain that's been created since Bane? I don't think there has been, not really. So you are the creator of Bane and the creator of many other things, and I'd like to just start with your experience with superheroes, your feelings about superheroes early on. How old were you when you were first given your first comic book?
Well, when I was a kid, comics were everywhere, so I really don't remember my first comic book. They were simply part of the environment, you know. But I remember comics being around and looking at comics, you know, long before I learned how to read.
Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, born in West Philadelphia, and then moved to the Philly suburbs, which is basically just North Philadelphia.
Yeah. Okay, so that's you were close to me. That's basically where I grew up as well. I mean, I was over the bridge in Jersey, but I still consider myself a Philly guy. So do you remember the first comic book that made an impact on you?
Well, the first one I can really remember was, I think it was a Tales to Astonish. It was a Kirby cover. It was this character called Spore. It was the giant monsters, and he was like this big yellow tentacled thing threatening people. Yeah. From inside of a castle, and that's the one I really remember first. And then the next thing that had a big impact on me was the first Batman 80-page giant, the first Batman annual, because it had all the old Dick Sprang stuff in it. So kind of blew
the giant
me away.
Typewriters.
Oh, all that stuff. The giant typewriters and the really crazy looking Batmobile with the big bat face on the front. And really, I think that's. You know, that kind of hooked me. And then, you know, I was around when the Marvel age came around, and that was a huge influence. Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, seeing them, you know, born basically.
Did you buy Fantastic Four #1 or Amazing Fantasy 15?
My first Marvels were hard to find back then because DC was distributing them. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were distributed. That's what caused the problem. Was originally. Marvel, when it was Atlas, were distributed by Dell, and Dell had like the best distribution system in the world. And Dell dropped them, and the only game in town was to go with National Periodicals, DC, and DC didn't do a real good job of distributing them.
Wow, that's disappointing, but I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, so my first Fantastic Four wasn't until issue 5. I didn't see it until issue 5, and Spider-Man, I think issue 4. Was my first one.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So,
who was in Fantastic Four #5? Was that Dr. Doom?
Dr. Doom, lifelong fan from that moment on. I just fell in love with that character. I fell in love with them. I fell in love with the villain, and then the very next issue, he's in it again with Submariner. I was in heaven.
Those first, I'm collecting. I'm right in the middle of collecting the first 40 issues of Fantastic Four right now, and I will tell you, it didn't get better than that. That Jack Kirby artwork, those over-the-top, wonderful, bigger-than-life ideas, and the funny family dynamic. I miss it. I wish Marvel could replicate it for this generation, but I don't know if they can. I don't know if you can do. There's such a sense of life with the Kennedys, like the New Frontier about that comic book. I don't know if it. Oh, maybe it does. Do you think it could apply today?
Yeah, I think you could do it today. You got to think of kids first. I mean, we're in this postmodern era of comics where everything is, cynical and ironic. If there was a way to shed that and go back to that sort of childish enthusiasm that Kirby had, and combine it with that hipster, that Las Vegas hipster mentality of Stan Lee. I mean, it was magical. But I don't know. I don't know if, there's, I always say that, superheroes have to be created through like adolescent passion, and Kirby was an adolescent his whole life, and Ditko at that time was just so filled with it, because think about it. I mean, Batman, Superman, and most of the Marvel characters in the Golden Age are created by teenagers, and these guys were running on enthusiasm, and it's hard to replicate that.
Yeah, I was talking to another writer who would never tell me how old he was. He's older than me. And I said, why won't you tell me how old you are? It's got to be somewhere in this margin. I don't know why you're so secretive. And he said, you never let people know how old you are in this business because they want you to think like an adolescent. And if you let them know that you're, a little bit older, then they'll kind of replace you with someone who is physically, actually chronologically younger in the hopes of getting that same superhero spark.
Yeah, and whenever I hear that, I always say, well, the first two Spider-Man movies, are the guy who wrote them was 78 years old. So, it's like you can't, adolescence can last a lifetime. I'm living proof of that. You probably are too. I mean, that's why we're in this business.
Yeah,
we just never grew out of it. Our parents wished we would grow out of it, and we didn't.
Yeah, I just superheroes are so deeply in my heart, and they mean so much to me that I dream about them. So I don't think that goes away. I actually do worry that it will go away, that I'll grow up at some point, and that's frightening. Hold on real quick. Raleigh Nyanza, thank you for the super chat. He says Bane is great and Sword and Flower is the best book. Sword and Flower.
I don't know that one.
You don't know Sword and Flower?
No. Maybe that's his book.
Maybe he's doing a little self-promotion.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's
we're all gonna Google that now.
All right, so you were okay. Did you have a little collection when you were a kid, or you just felt like comic books were everywhere? They were like water. There was no need to save them.
No, I got in the collector bug early, and in fact, I in my neighborhood I formed a comic book club, and they would keep all the comics at my house. And my theory was that they would eventually outgrow them because I knew I wasn't going to, and I would just inherit everybody else's comic book collection.
Why did they keep them at your house?
Because I convinced them that this was the place where the comic book club was being held. I was like 8. It didn't work out. They all wanted their comic books back eventually. So.
All right. So, big fan. So what was your favorite superhero? First of all, did you have a favorite that you draw?
Yeah, I did. I tried to draw my own comics, and I realized early on I was not Steve Ditko, and this wasn't going to happen. So I concentrated more on the writing end. But for a long time, I had to draw my own comics because there was no one else to do it for me.
Who was your favorite hero?
It shifted around. I was really in love with Spider-Man for a long time. The Ditko run on Spider-Man, a huge influence on me. I used it as basically a template for Robin when I wrote Robin, and I like Sergeant Rock too. I love Batman. Every kid loves Batman, but I would go through phases.
Waisel, thank you for the super chat. He says current and upcoming comics. So that jumps ahead a little bit, but you can hit that question right now. What are you writing currently, and what's coming up?
I'm doing some stuff for Zenescope. It's a first issue of Robin Hood: The Curse came out this week. I'm doing something for Scott McDaniel's company, Black Box. Oh boy, what else am I working on? I'm doing the Avalon book for Vox Day for the Alt Hero line. I'm doing an adaptation of Right Ho G's by P.G. Woodhouse, also for Vox. I'm doing another project I can't talk about yet because I've written 3 issues of it, but I don't think the creators want me talking about it right now.
That's a lot.
And again, I got my own line. I got my own line of novels. I'm finishing up my 5th Levon Cade novel. So
What are they called?
so I'm staying busy. Leave on Cade. It's sort of it scratches my Punisher itch. It's a former Marine from Alabama going around getting himself in trouble, fighting crime, vigilante justice stuff.
That sounds great. Magical Merlin, thank you for the super chat. Hey guys, question for Chuck. What non-superhero comic is your favorite?
Oh wow. Well, I mentioned Sergeant Rock. It's probably Sergeant Rock.
Yeah.
So I love the Kubert stuff, and I love the Russ Heath stuff in the early '70s. To me, that comics don't get better than that.
So let's talk about you being a teenager. First of all, when I was a kid, I kind of around 15, I discovered girls and I gave up comics for about 3 years. Did that kind of happen to you too, or?
Yeah, I discovered girls, but they didn't discover me. So I stayed with comics. There was never really any interruption there. Well, sometime in the '70s when comics got so bad, I couldn't stand to look at them. But
what was bad about the comics in the '70s?
They were too wordy. Basically fanboys had taken over at Marvel and DC, and they were writing their own continuities, their own dream continuities, and they sort of began to ignore character and action, plot, things like that. So you got these incredibly wordy books that weren't in any way cinematographic. I mean, there weren't comics anymore. There was no balance between words and pictures. So I sort of didn't really stop buying, but I was a lot more selective through the '70s. Then the '80s came along, and things got better.
Things got better in the '80s. The '70s was a weird decade. I swear to God. Like, I don't know what happened. I mean, everybody just immediately says it's drugs, but like the '70s just, I mean, they sucked, didn't they?
Yeah, because I mean, my parents went deep into the '70s, and they weren't into drugs. And, the horrible clothes and the awful music and the terrible TV shows, everything sucked. It was horrible.
Everything was orange and brown, and yeah, it's like the television was insulting. I mean, Rod Serling went from the Twilight Zone in the '60s to Night Gallery in the '70s, which was, I don't care what anyone says, it was not good, and he looked orange in it. Like he was better off in black and white.
Yeah. Everything devolved.
Yeah, like everything got stupid. I don't understand why everything got stupid. Like Iron Man got a nose. There was HR Puffin stuff and like all that horrible
What was
nonsense.
that about? What was that about?
Animation sucked. It was a bad decade, so it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that in the 1970s, comics also suffered. I don't really recall. I'm not much of a Bronze Age guy, so I don't have the same feeling as you did about it. Did Spider-Man get bad?
Yeah, they all got bad, and you had writers writing them who didn't want to be writing them. I remember talking to Archie Goodwin. This was the early '80s, very early '80s, and I said, are there any characters no one wants to write? And of course he said the Stan Lee line, no, everybody loves to write all of our characters. I said, well, there's got to be some book that no one wants to write that you have to literally assign to someone. And he goes, yeah, Spider-Man and the Hulk. Nobody wants to write them.
What?
Seriously? I mean, can you even imagine that today? I mean, so they would have to make, and that explained everything,
That is disgusting. You know what? I think I blame Charles Manson for everything in the '70s.
Why not?
Did it? Like, yeah, well, you might as well. Like, he really did cap off the 1960s in a kind of downer kind of way. I mean, the Zodiac Killer was another one. I mean, he was pretty bad too, but Charles Manson really did kind of say, you know what, the '60s are over, and now we're going to get right into the worst of the worst. Like, now it's going to be Goober and the Ghost Chasers. Now it's going to be the Bugaloos.
Right.
Now it's going to be all that endless, like, wimpy, whiny prog rock.
Yeah, polyester clothes, and oh God.
I mean, I only shared the earth with Elvis Presley for 3 years, but I mean, it sounds like you lived through the '70s in a much more harmful way, like it impacted you.
Yes, it did. I mean, I would rebel against. I mean, I wore a lot of Army surplus in the '70s because they just didn't want to look like everybody else.
Did you have the mustache and the beard? Were you that guy with the long kind of hair? And
I grew my hair longish, but I had the full beard. Everybody I worked with used to call me Serpico because I had this Korean War era raincoat that I would wear in the wintertime. Mostly because I was working in Philadelphia at nights, late at night, and to go back and forth to my house by the subway, you want to look kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I'm 6'3", and the beard and the ratty looking raincoat. Yeah, nobody ever bothered me.
Wow. Well, by the way, this is the other question that I want to ask. And I just started asking this question because I grew up very poor. And so for me, scraping together 75 cents, which is what they were for a comic book in 1986, 7, was difficult. It was a challenge for a 12-year-old. So how about you? Where did you get your money for comics?
Well, I mean, I remember when comics went from 10 to 12 cents. You think, like a lot of comic book creators, I was sick a lot as a kid. I was hospitalized a lot, and so it looked like I wasn't going to pass first grade because I missed so many days. So my mother was frantic. She said, how can he pass? And the teacher said, well, if he passes the reading test, we'll let him go to second grade. So my mother went to the family doctor because in our neighborhood, the only guy who graduated college was the family doctor. And she said, I really want him to graduate, go to second grade, and he wants to pass this reading test. So the doctor says, what's he like to read? My mother says, he likes comic books. The doctor said, get him all the comic books he wants. So all of my relatives, every time they came to the house, would have comic books, because they were encouraging me to read. And my dad would come home every Friday night from the farmer's market with coverless comics tied in twine. It was just this huge stack of like every kind of comic you can imagine, just tied in twine. So, I read hundreds and hundreds of comics, and I passed the reading test at a sixth grade level. Thank you, Stan Lee. But that was my comic book economy. And then I used to collect paper for recycling before we called it recycling. And I would use that to buy comics. Other kids would buy candy bars. I would buy comics.
Got a super chat here. Oops, I lost it. Let me get it back up here. Super chat here from the Yellow Flash. Chuck, my first comic book ever was Robin the Joker's Wild. Will you ever write Nightwing or Robin again? We miss you! Exclamation point.
If they ask me, I'll write it. So get them to ask me.
Well, that's that leads to another kind of offshoot of a question, and then we'll get back to your history. I mean, is that the book that you'd want to do if you only did one book at DC? I mean, where would you go?
I don't know where I would go with the story, but it would be fun. I mean, I'm familiar with the characters. I was on them so long.
But I mean, would you go back to doing Robin or Nightwing, or is there another book? If they said you can have one book at DC right now, and that's going to be the book that you're going to write for the next 5 years, what would it be?
I'd probably like to have a shot at Superman.
Really?
Yeah. But I was always in the Batman camp. And that's how they saw me. I was typecast as the Batman guy. I did a few Superman things, but not many. And they were usually things I was called upon to do last minute, when the writer got sick or something. But I did one thing with Graham Nolan, but Graham came up with all the concepts and all for that. I really was just the writer on it. He was really the concept guy on it. But yeah, I'd like a shot because it'd be something different.
So the 70s mercifully come to an end. and the 80s come around, and suddenly we've got Cyndi Lauper, we've got Michael Jackson's Thriller. It's 1984. We've got we got Kaja Gugu. What else was going on in 1984?
You had the Terminator. You had MTV.
Yeah, I'm thinking of wackier, more embarrassing things. We had that what's that show with the whammy? That game show.
Gong Show?
No.
Oh, the whammy. Was that Joker's Wild?
God. I was going to say the Joker's Wild, but that's not what it is. Press Your Luck.
That's it.
I'm watching reruns of Press Your Luck on the Game Show Network, and I was like, I wonder what happened to this game show host. And it said, well, the game show host, he was an amateur pilot. Now, as soon as you hear, Chuck, that someone's an amateur pilot, like if someone says, hey, I'm an amateur pilot, you could say to him, oh, well, I can tell you how you're going to die.
Yes.
I mean, and sure enough, he crashed his airplane. I was like, that's a shame. I really liked his game show, and I like those whammies. So it's 1984, and how did you break into comics?
Well, pretty much comics exploded. There were all these different publishers and there were all these different distributors, and there were a lot of comics coming out. I mean, to the point where they were calling it a glut, even though they were selling. So if you had a pulse and any kind of determination, you could get work. So,
did you have a pulse?
Yeah, I had a pulse, and I had all the determination in the world. So I started going up for interviews. I would meet editors at conventions and get them to meet me. I would never hand them pitches and stuff. I would just like have a conversation. So hopefully it would remember me. And I went up over and over again to interviews. And at a show I think it was at a farmer's market, guy had a comic book stand, and Tim Truman appeared there. And I went and talked to him because he was working in comics. He gave me some advice and eventually helped me get in at Eclipse Comics with Cat and Dean out in California.
Cat Ironwood
and Dean Mulaney. And then almost simultaneously, Hillary Barta. I was talking to him on the phone because I met him at a couple of conventions. And he told me that Larry Hama was starting up a new magazine at Marvel, and it was all going to be war stories and Westerns. And I thought, oh God, I gotta be part of that. So he said, but watch out for Larry. He's kind of a bastard.
Yo, he is.
I know. Everybody's got a Larry Hama story. So I called him. I'm loaded for bear now. I want to be on this book, and I'm forewarned, right? So I'm going to have to be a little bit of a bastard too to get any work. So I call him, and he don't know who the hell I am. And I said, so he tells me about the book, and I said, Larry, you need me. And he goes, I need you. I said, yeah, you need me. I said, because correct me if I'm wrong, but most comic book writers don't know which end of a gun the bullets come out of. And he goes, well, you're right. He says, well, you're right about that. He goes, send me some of your ideas and I'll see if I need you. So I sent him some plot lines, handwritten, by the way. So sent him some plot lines. And he called me back and said, there's 5 or 6 of these I really like. And from there, he couldn't give me enough work. He was always giving me stuff to do. And eventually, Savage Sword of Conan. So simultaneously, Tim Truman helped me get in at Eclipse. And then with Hillary Barta's advice, I got in at Marvel.
That's wonderful. Well, wait a second. What happened to Kimiko?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was kind of, that wasn't going anywhere. I didn't, I only got along with a couple of them. It was like 4 guys running it. And I think I only got along with 2 of them. And
well, how did you get along with Larry Hama from there on?
Oh, I got along great with Larry. See, that's an acid test with Larry. He gives you a bunch of crap when he first meets you, and you're supposed to overcome that. And that tells him that you can work under pressure. Like I love Larry. I collect Larry Hama stories in my mind. My favorite one is when Lee Weeks called him on the phone and said, I want to come show you my portfolio. And Larry said, I don't want to see your portfolio because you suck. And Lee's like, hey, so you've seen my work? And Larry said, no, I can tell by talking to you on the phone, you suck. now, what you were supposed to do was call him back every day that week until he looked at the portfolio. You were supposed to just keep on charging. But he figured if you ran away at the first assault, then he couldn't count on you when the crunch came. So.
Wow, it's like basic training almost, isn't it, with Larry
seriously,
Hama?
But he's an ex-Army guy, so I guess he learned it there.
And he was always. Thank you for the super chat. Hey Chuck, Birds of Prey was my favorite book, both your and Gail's run. What was the inspiration and approach for creating Birds of Prey?
Well, the inspiration was all Jordan Gorfinkel, the editor. He came up with the idea of Black Canary and Oracle would make a great team. And he thought there was chemistry there. I didn't see it. And for a year, he bothered me to write the first one-shot. Finally, I agreed just to get him off my back. And 6 pages into writing the first one-shot, I went, damn it, he's right. There's a chemistry here. It's just what he said. There's a chemistry. And I objected to it because Black Canary's book had just been canceled. And, I didn't see there was any future for it. But he was right. And he kept campaigning for that book. And every time there was a hole in the publishing schedule, he would insert a one-shot or a miniseries of Birds of Prey in there until eventually they agreed to do a monthly. So I give all credit to Jordan. He saw that I didn't.
He's a great guy. I like Jordan.
He is. He's an awesome guy.
All right. So in the 80s, you began working with a bunch of different rather good artists. I mean, you had Tom Lyle. You had Paul Galassi. Oh my God, I would love to hear how you and Tom Lyle got along. Paul Galassi and David Wenzel.
Yeah.
Who drew your Moon Knight run?
Sal Voluto.
Oh my God.
Yeah, even almost all of it was Sal Voluto, 2 years.
Is Sal Voluto Mormon? Did I hear that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Where did I hear that he was Mormon?
I don't know. It's never come up.
Well, I would be aware of it because I was raised Mormon. And I was like, oh, there are no more Mormon artists in comics, and it turns out there are a couple. So I heard that. I could be wrong. Don't anybody take that to the bank, but it might be true. How was it working on Moon Knight? Because by the way, you on Moon Knight, sensational.
Well, yeah, it was. Well, Carl Potts brought me on because I had worked on his Alien Legion, and he became editor on Moon Knight, and he wanted me to emphasize the Mark Spector as a mercenary, former mercenary, and I had just seen Dogs of War and loved it, so I was all about that take on it, and we just carried on like that, and he got me Sal, who's just an incredible artist, and he got me a fill-in issue by Russ Heath, which I was blown away by. So, because I let Russ, like to just idolize Russ. So, yeah, I mean, and Carl was great and everything else, and then he left me, and they replaced him with Danny Fingeroff. So.
Oh yeah. Where did Carl go? Is Carl?
He moved on to some other project or something. I don't know quite why there was a change in editorship, but the wheels came off rather quickly when Danny took over.
Really? How come? What happened?
He was more of a nitpicky, change this, change that. I think he wanted to write the book. One of those editors. There's two kind of editors. I always say there's two kind of editors in Don Daly. There's the editor who hires you and trusts you to do what you're doing, and then there's the editor who wants to write the book themselves, and you're just a, go between. And Danny one time said to me, I was watching an episode of Wise Guy, and he tells me this whole episode of Wise Guy. And he says, I want you to do something like that on Moon Knight. And I said, well, I can use some of those elements. No, I want you to rewrite the last issue you wrote to include those elements. I said, no, I'm not doing that. That's never going to happen.
That is strange.
So I eventually said to him, look, I'm not going to quit this book. You're going to have to man up and fire me. If you're trying to make it so hard for me that I want to quit, it's never going to happen.
Did he have someone else in mind?
I guess I can't remember who took over after me, but he did eventually say, we decide to go in another direction. You've heard that one.
Backwards. Down. Yeah, I've heard that a few times. Yeah, I'm telling you, you're exactly right about that. There are editors that get so involved. The other kind of editor isn't that they're nitpicky, but it isn't because they want to write the book. It's because they want to appear busy and they're doing something.
Yeah, well, I see that never bothered Denny O'Neil. It was like, yeah, this is good. Or Larry just, yeah, it's good. Let it go.
That's
unless you're really screwed up, they wouldn't come after you.
Yeah, that's the right, that's the kind of editor that you want to work with for a long time. But I mean, I've had editors that are just that just feel like noodling with things. Yeah. That get your work and want to make minor changes and things that just are kind of pointless. And you're like, you want to look like you're doing something to the higher ups, don't you? I think that's what's going on right now.
Which I don't understand. I mean, just spend your time in your office playing fantasy football and tell them you did a bunch of stuff. I mean, who's going to know? Yeah. When a great cover comes in, oh, look at this cover that Ethan did. Oh yeah, I told him to do that.
Yeah. Take credit for everything. Who cares?
Yeah, I don't care. Just leave me the hell alone. I mean, you and I don't know what they say in the editorial meetings anyway. So
no, we don't. I wish we did.
We don't want to know. We don't want to know. Trust me, we don't want to know.
No, they always do that. They'll sit there. I'll go, well, I need something to do. I have 4 days, so is there anything to do? And then they come back and go, yeah, well, we all kicked it around. I'm like, we all what? We all kicked it around. So, I mean, you get this feeling that there's a big editorial room where they all sit around and go, hey, Ethan needs something to do. Does anybody have something for him? And they all go, maybe.
How was him?
It's like, I don't like that guy. I don't have anything for him. Somebody goes, he can have 4 pages of this. But yeah, it's like, you always wonder what that's about. And for the longest time, I mean, listen, you're a writer and I'm an artist. You would get invited to the summit meetings. If there were summit meetings in the 90s, were there?
Oh yeah, yeah. We went to some. We had some artists there too, and we were making money on Nightfall, so they would invite everybody. Hell, we had an inker there once.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, for a little while, it was just the writers, and I think it was in the 2000s. Like suddenly the artists were nothing because I think they were blaming us for the image implosion of the 90s. So suddenly we were workhorses and dogs and peasants, and writers were royalty, and they got to do all the cool stuff. And
artists couldn't be trusted.
Well, yeah, because we would just do splash pages of people screaming like on every and jumping at the camera on every page if you let us.
Yeah, and if they paid you enough, you'd leave.
Oh, that's true too. Oh, yeah. There's no loyalty. There's no loyalty in this business. You got to go where the money is.
Exactly.
So it's the 90s now. I wish, but no. It's hypothetically, it's the 90s, and now this has got to be your time here. After the 80s, which I guess you would consider to be your proving grounds. I mean, for the 6 years of the 80s that you were working, you were doing a lot of stuff that was kind of B-list, kind of Moon Knight and Alien Legion, and then the small. Suddenly, somebody notices you. Somebody must have noticed you. I'm imagining this in my head, because you got picked up and you got put on the biggest characters of the time, Batman and the Punisher.
Yeah.
Who was that person? Well, those people.
Well, on Batman, it was Denny O'Neil. He had read a lot of my run on Airboy, and he liked how I wrote a teenage character. He said he thought it was believable, and I wasn't like trying to be a hip guy. I wasn't trying to use a lot of slang and stuff. I wrote like an honest teenager, with all the worries and anxieties of a teenager. So that's what he said, and so he wanted to give me a shot at Robin. And, once I did it, and, the first one was hugely successful, then they couldn't do enough for me. And then he couldn't keep me busy enough. On Punisher, I campaigned for Punisher. It's the only character I've really bugged the hell out of the editor because I just wanted to write it so bad. I think it irritated Mike Baron because he knew how hard I was working to write Punisher. But, they were giving work. Yeah, he was writing it at the time. In fact, the first time Mike and I met, when we parted, the last thing he said to me was, "You'll never write the Punisher."
I'm going to get Mike Baron in here right now.
Oh no, he'll tell you.
That would be really funny.
So
Mike's like, "When's my interview?" And I'm like, "Soon."
Oh no,
it'd be so funny to send him a link to this chat, have him come in and fight with you about the Punisher. But you wanted that book, and at the time, I mean, Punisher was the biggest thing. You didn't write for Jim Lee, did you?
No. I remember meeting Jim Lee when he came in the offices because Carl was writing at the time, and Don Daly was editing everything. So I met Jim a whole bunch of times when he was first coming in with pages. I remember Carl Potts showing me, his first pages for Punisher. Like, look at this guy. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty damn good.
Really?
Yeah, I wish I was writing for him.
I'm beaming right now. I'm smiling about that little bit of history. I'm just like, really? That's great. So what was it like? What were the highlights of your time on Punisher and Punisher War Journal? And
there were a lot of them. I just love that character. I just have an affinity for that character. He's the only character that I don't write anymore, but I always think of stories for. I mean, so you'll see something in the news, you go, oh man, Punisher would be right in the middle of all that. Punisher would be on the Mexican border. Punisher would have been in New Orleans during Katrina. He would have gotten that congressman. And the thing is, I wrote so much Punisher in such a short amount of time because Don Daly just seemed to spend all of his hours thinking of new ways I could write more Punisher. So he was always coming up with specials and one-shots and miniseries that he could put me on. And it did. I mean, eventually, I was writing all 3 monthlies, until they were all canceled. So
how do you come up with 3 revenge fantasies per month?
Well, my thing was that, there were 2 kind of Punisher stories, and I favored one, but I would do the other, where, he's up against impossible odds, some Marvel, universe supervillain. Then the other one was what I called the quality of life crime issues, where he's up against carjackers or, guys holding up drugstores. I mean, there was a story I always wanted to do and they would never let me do, which was the Punisher's reading the paper, basically looking for people to punish. And he sees this article about how businessmen at JFK, when they go in to use the men's room, they sit down in the stall and they hang their bag on that hook on the door, and then someone would steal it. An arm comes over and grabs their bag and runs off, and they can't catch up to them because they got their pants down. And so I said, well, Punisher would stake out one of those stalls. He'd just be sitting in one of those stalls with a shotgun across his knee, waiting for that arm to come over the door. And they were, oh God, they were horrified. Like, oh, you can't write that.
Punisher needs something to do. He's bored.
He's like, yeah. You know, and that's the thing. That I thought was the main appeal of Punisher. We all read the newspaper and all go, why don't they do something about this? Well, the Punisher would do the same thing, except he would do something about it. To me, that was the appeal, not him, you know, teaming up with the Silver Surfer. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
So he'd just be compelled to commit acts of violence against people who need to be punished. Like he thirsts for justice, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, like most of the guys I think who wrote Punisher were inspired by like The Executioner and, you know, those action adventure men's paperbacks in the 70s. I was more inspired by the novel Death Wish that the movie was based on, because it was quite different. And at the end of the novel Death Wish, he's stalking kids who were dropping rocks from bridges onto commuter trains.
Wow.
So I thought, well, that's where Frank Castle would be. You know, wherever innocent people were being harmed in whatever way.
You better believe it. Shadow Walker 13, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Chuck. What's your favorite portrayal of Bane in media, games, animation, etc.? And what's your opinion of Bane's portrayal in The Dark Knight Rises?
Well, my favorite is the animated versions. I mean, the first time he appeared in the cartoons, Henry Silva did his voice, and I was just thrilled beyond imagining. And I generally liked all of the animated versions. The movie version, the most recent movie version, I love it because it made him a household name. So that certainly helps me and Graham Nolan out in the you know, with royalties and things like that, because he appears more now. He's more popular now than he's ever been in games and Lego. Thank you, Lego.
Lego is so good.
Oh yeah, Lego. They love Bane at Lego. They are constantly putting him in everything, which I really appreciate. Fisher Price uses Bane a lot too, you know. And I don't know, a lot of people don't know, but Bane was a pasta shape once in SpaghettiOs. They had a.
Oh my God!
So we got a royalty check from SpaghettiOs. Chef Boyardee signed it himself.
Delicious. I love The Dark Knight Rises. I went to see that 3 times in the theater, and I don't think there's ever been another movie like that for me, where I was just like, I watched it once and said that was really good, and I came home and couldn't stop thinking about it, and I had to go back and see it again, and then even a 3rd time. I loved Bane's portrayal in that movie, even though I was well aware that it wasn't the comic book version. He was still very, very spooky. That voice of his. Yeah. I'm going to go back and watch that again.
And he was a mastermind. He was a chess player. They showed him as an intellect, which I liked. And they showed him as, you know, incredibly phically opposing, which him being smart only made him scarier. You know,
it made him very political, though, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, that was where they kind of diverged, I think.
Well, you know, he got me an apology from Rush Limbaugh live on the air, so that was nice.
I was going to bring that up too. So, are people who don't? Do you mind if I tell people this about both?
No, go right ahead.
All right. So me and Chuck are both Republicans. All right. So it's 2012, and Mitt Romney is running for president. Obviously, Chuck and I are both supporting Mitt Romney. And wow, you know, the Dark Knight movie is advertised, and some people become aware that the villain in the movie is Bane, and Mitt Romney's company that the media was currently demonizing as vampiric was called Bane Capital. And certain people, maybe on our side of the aisle, sensed a conspiracy. They smelled a rat, and they didn't realize, did they, that the creator of Bane sympathized with Mitt Romney, I would say.
Yeah. And Rush went into it like, you know, the character was created for the movie, didn't realize the character was, you know, created in 92, 93, and became aware of it between that day and the next. And the next day, live on the air, he apologized to me because he said that he didn't know.
Oh my God. Did you tape it?
No, I didn't. The creator of Bane was a longtime conservative, and but we Graham and I put Rush in a issue of Detective early on, and he talked about that on the air, and he hated it because he thought we were making fun of him, and the exact opposite was true. We weren't making fun of him at all. We were showing him accurately. But
you got to come on that. You got to go on his show and just say we've had a lot of misunderstandings, you and I.
yes,
You might not be aware of it.
well, if he gave a damn about comic books, that might happen, but I don't think
no.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, he jumps to a lot of conclusions, but I'll tell you that was really, really funny. I had a good laugh about that whole thing. I was like, nope, wrong. But isn't that weird? I mean, that's kind of synchronicity is what pop culture is all about. And so let's talk about creating Bane because, the other thing that you were doing really in the 90s, we had Kelly Jones on here before. Did you work with Kelly Jones?
I've never worked with Kelly. I mean, we worked closely together, obviously, in Nightfall, but I never directly wrote anything for him.
Do you regret it now?
Yeah, I'd like to work with Kelly. I like Kelly.
There's always time,
it was me and Graham. It was me and Graham in that period. We were wed at the hip, which is fine with me. I love Graham too. We collaborate well together.
Diversity, inclusion, compassion, kindness in comics. That stands for Dick in comics. Thank you for the super chat. He says, Dark Knight Rises was my favorite of the 3 Nolan flicks because of Tom Hardy's Bane. Mine too, Cecil. How much did it hurt to see that whack version of Bane and Batman and Robin? Great question.
It's really weird. When that was out, the summer that was out, Graham and I were at San Diego. DC sent us out to San Diego to promote Nightfall. And 3 nights in a row, we went to the movies to see that movie. And each time as we got to the box office to pay, we went, and we picked another movie. We never did see it.
Have you seen it now?
I've seen it in bits and pieces. I have never seen it from beginning to end.
Oh, so bad.
But the only thing I can say about it is they made a lot of toys.
So, yeah, the 90s were a good decade for you.
Yeah, they also named the motorcycle that Robin used in the movie Redbird, which is what I had named Robin's car. So me and Tom Grummett got money off of that. So that was nice too.
Wow.
But I mean, everybody, I think that I don't think there's any argument it's the worst Batman movie ever made.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. It was very, very difficult to watch. Very difficult. I have the same. I still haven't seen Green Lantern all the way through. I got 40 minutes in and so I don't know what this is.
Well, that's why people say to me, "What do you think of the Punisher on TV?" Is I've never seen it. I never will. Because it's too painful to watch. When you were so invested in these characters, I mean, I can believe you. You can't sit through Green Lantern, because you're too closely associated with it.
Punisher seems to be pretty good, though.
Yeah, but you're not closely associated with it. Plus, you got to think, there's another one of my ideas they used. I mean, the Thomas Jane Punisher movie where he's torturing the guy with the popsicle. It's like, my God, I wrote it and Johnny Romita Jr. storyboarded it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, line for line what I wrote. Shot for shot with Johnny Drew. So
they had that Birds of Prey TV show. I watched the first episode. That was the worst pilot since JFK Jr. I mean, it was just absolutely dreadful. And did you see that? And were you extremely pained by that as well, or what?
I watched a couple of episodes, and then after it was all over, I met Dina Meyer at a convention, and she broke my heart further by saying that she spent months practicing in a wheelchair so she would look like she was a natural. And she even went to a martial artist guy who taught her how to stick fight from a wheelchair. And then she said, I get to the set the first day and the chair is electric. It does everything. I didn't have to do anything. She said, I was so upset, because she spent all that time. So
there's a lot to that. I mean, the idea of really coming prepared for a job as an artist. I mean, really, you're going to put your heart into it, and you've really you've done the method acting thing,
right?
And then it's shit.
Yeah. Well, you never know until it comes out. But yeah, they made every mistake they could make. It's a shame because now they do the TV and the movies, and it's closer to the core material. They don't mess with it as much. So yeah, maybe they'll do it again.
So let's get back. We're skipping all around here, and I blame the super chatters, but keep those super chats coming. Don't listen to me. All right, so Batman. I mean, how did, first of all, Denny O'Neil brought you on to Batman. Denny O'Neil, fantastic, like legendary writer and then editor of DC Comics. What was he like? What is he like? What was Denny like to work with?
Well, Denny he's a painfully shy guy, and he's very into his own head. And it comes off sometimes as rudeness, but it's not. He's a really sweet guy. And he and I were, I mean, come on. He's the most famous bleeding heart liberal in comics. And he was the beginning of bleeding heart liberalism in comics. But we got along great. And we would argue about politics, off the clock, but then just go right back to work and everything was fine. But he gave me tons of work. In fact, this may come as a shock to everybody listening, but when he was getting ready to retire, he asked me if I wanted to take over as group editor.
Wow.
And he said it was mine. He'd already talked to everybody, and it was mine if I wanted it.
Chuck, why did you say no?
I said I couldn't take the cut and pay, and I couldn't relocate my family to the New York area. I couldn't do it. And he says I knew you'd say that. So, but if I knew what was coming after that, I might have taken it. But we never know what's coming after that.
No, we never know. It would have been really, really great to have you be group editor at DC Comics. That would have been fantastic.
I probably would have gone nuts in a week, So, because one more meeting and it's like, oh my God, leave me alone.
You'd still be there. You would have been happy. You would have been happy with the creative control over.
It might have been fun. It might have been fun, But there you go.
So you, no. So you ended up, kind of taken in by Denny O'Neil. You're a little bit kind of working under his wing, and then he gives you Robin with Tom Weil. Again, Tom Weil. Tom Weil, your buddy?
Yeah, we're friends. I'm, again, another guy I can't talk politics with, but we're friends. I mean, we did work at Eclipse together. I kind of brought him into. I mean, he was working for some small outfit, and I brought him into Eclipse to do Skywolf backups and Airboy. And, from there, we worked together quite a bit. And then he was the one, he was already assigned to Robin because he was exclusive to DC. And then Denny called me in. And, he was there with me for the initial meeting. And then we were both living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the time. So the whole train ride home from New York to Lancaster, he was bugging me. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I'm trying to think, and I wouldn't tell him anything. I wouldn't even make any notes. So I just pretended I wasn't thinking about it at all. Of course, all I could think of is, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
So describe your run on Detective Comics, would you please? What is it? So you wrote Detective Comics for almost 100 issues.
Yeah, it was the first Bat Summit I was ever invited to, and at the time I was only writing Robin miniseries. I had no monthly at DC, and I wondered why. Why do they have me here? I'm just writing Robin miniseries, and at the end of the first day at the summit, I'm just like sitting. I'm like Ray Liotta in that scene where they're with Joe Pesci's mom and De Niro. And they're all talking and they're all improvising, and Liotta doesn't even know where to jump in, and he's just sitting there, what about you? You don't talk much. Oh, I'm just listening. And that was me, like the whole first day at this summit, just listening, and then finally at the end of the day, then he says, I wanted to talk to you. Everybody else is leaving. I wanted to talk to you. And I thought, well, this is where I get thrown out, because I didn't contribute anything. And he said, do you want to take on Detective? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, the oldest comic book still in publication. Yes, please give me Detective. And he says, well, it doesn't sell as well as Batman. And I said, you know what? I don't care. I want to write Detective Comics. So, they put me on Detective, and it was me and Tom Weil for a little while, and then Tom left to do Spider-Man.
What do you remember? What are your feelings about your run? I mean, your run on Detective really kind of lasted from the end of the comics boom, like the tail end of the comics boom, to a point when comics were almost seemed like they were going to collapse. Isn't that right? I mean,
yeah. There was definitely sales were dropping. Well, of course, we were abandoning the newsstand, which I kept saying, this is a terrible idea, because I was seeing my royalty statements, and almost all my royalties were coming from the newsstand. Why are we leaving this cash cow behind? Because they were so all in on the direct market, which I thought was a mistake. And, the direct market, the retailers would go, oh, we don't want to have to compete with the newsstand. And they didn't even try to make them understand. You're not competing with the newsstand. The newsstand is your entry level. That's where the fans find the comics. Nobody's going to walk into a comic shop cold. They're going to find them when they're kids, and then eventually they're going to come to your shop. But they never made them understand that. And so, the writing was on the wall. And then, Image came along, and Wizard magazine, which I blame for the fall of comics.
No. Well, I'm going to argue with you about that, because you're as wrong about that as they were about the newsstand. This is all about. I listened to you talk about like the newsstand, and I'm like, why are we so stupid? Why is everybody in this business? Why do we make these stupid mistakes? You're exactly right. The newsstand is where kids trip over comics. It's where they say, hey, that looks neat. And then eventually they get hooked and addicted, and they find their way into a comic book store, and it becomes a lifestyle. Well, we used to have something called Wizard magazine. Chuck, tell me where I'm wrong, okay?
Wizard. What was going on at the time was Wizard came out. Wizard would be harmless. It was the Tiger Beat of comics. It would be harmless if it was just out there doing the silly stuff it was doing. The problem is that the editors at the company, even though they knew it was BS from cover to cover, began to believe it. And they began to oh, Wizard says this guy's hot. There's no evidence this guy's hot. And I would say, look, last month I wrote 4 of the top 10 Diamond comics, and I've never been on their hot list. This doesn't make any sense. Their hot writers aren't hot. They're not selling. Look at your own circulation figures and figure out who's hot. And that was the problem. The younger editors, the Generation Y editors, began to believe what was in Wizard, even though they knew it was just PR nonsense. And that's where it killed it. I'm not against Wizard magazine. Fine, have a goofy fan magazine. Starlog didn't hurt anything. But nobody in Hollywood was reading Starlog going, oh, well, we should be making the movie they should. We say we should be making. We should do a sequel to Crow.
I disagree. Chance, thank you for the super chat. He says he's going to listen later on. He really liked Winter World and would love to see more. So he's waiting for this to get recorded. Chuck, but listen, there was a point when we had the newsstand, but beyond that, we had a glossy magazine with a big colorful cover that was painted by Bart Sears pretending to be somebody else.
Right.
And it was in supermarkets. Okay. It was where kids could see it because they were shopping with their moms, and it cost $4, and these kids would get it, go home, and they would read these snotty articles by Gen Y writers, that were aimed at 13-year-olds.
Right.
And because of that, consequently, you and I can argue about how, the top 10 list never got it right, except when I was #1 for 5 months in a row. Then they got it right. But for the most part, it was a lot of seemingly payola, et cetera, et cetera. That's all fine, but that's just minuscule. We don't have an advocate anymore out there on the stands to bring kids into comics. There are 100 magazines about video games and 0 magazines about comic books now, and it's because we killed it.
No, I understand. And like I said, if it was just a magazine and it was just out there, God bless it, it is making kids interested in comics and in the creators, which was cool. Treating them like sports stars. So that was cool. But my problem is that on the editorial end of the companies, they began to treat it like a Bible, and they began to hire guys who really weren't good. Who weren't any good. I remember once an editor called me and says, I got this great artist for your next issue of this comic. And I'm like, oh, who is it? I said, well, the guy who was #1 on Wizard's hot list last month? I said, yeah. And he goes, I got his brother. I mean, that's how far it went. It was crazy. It was like the British invasion that happened or something. It was bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, it was working though. Everybody was making so much money.
Yeah. Well, kids were buying them. But you remember, kids were buying them then. And I say, but I don't think it was Wizard. I think it was because they were still on the newsstand.
Well, too.
You know,
That too. Well, I think the two things together are the problem. But I mean, even now, like the comic book convention is dying, and I largely blame that on the absence of Wizard 2. And people say, well, we go to these conventions now, and it's nothing but cosplayers and like TV celebrities and comic book artists and writers just sit in Artist Alley, and nobody knows who they are. Yeah, that's because Wizard Magazine isn't around anymore.
well, that's true. We're not identified. You know,
Mm-mm. And that's, I believe that YouTube is the closest like replacement for Wizard Magazine at this point. I
yeah,
believe
yeah. You're right.
yeah, there are guys who have 1.5 million followers, subs on YouTube, like Comic Story and Comics Explained. And I tell these guys, you're more powerful than CNN. And if you would put your powers to good use, in other words, say take Chuck Dixon and put him on your show, and then hey, it's Chuck Dixon, show his face, talk to him,
Right.
whatever it is, you'd make him famous. And I've walked around with these YouTubers at New York City Comic Con, and everybody knew who they were.
Yeah.
Like they were walking around, hey Benny, what's up? People knew him from his voice. He would speak, and everybody would turn around.
Wow.
So it's much bigger than anybody even knows, and it's like maybe that's the thing. But the '90s, just killing the newsstand and killing Wizard Magazine, and we did it like, I don't know, we did it out of spite. I remember watching it happen in slow motion and just wanting to tell everyone to just shut up, stop trying to kill Wizard Magazine. We need it. And then
Also, they shifted focus to where we have a fan base and we're going to write everything to appeal to them. We're not going to do mass appeal comics anymore. And there was a slow turn toward that, and that was the last nail. So.
We got 2 super chats here. Volpine Eldrick, Ethan, thank you for the super chat. You here on YouTube is my entry point into comics. Volpine, wow, that makes me very happy to hear. Okay, that's exactly why I'm doing this. Thank you so much. Hayes Llewellyn, thanks for the super chat. Story behind Stephanie Brown's pregnancy and Robin.
Well, it came about because I thought Robin was about teenagers, and teenagers were facing the kind of difficulties that teenagers didn't face when I was a kid, or at least not with the frequency. So teen pregnancy, drugs, guns in school. These were not I hate to use issues, but they were story points I could use so that kids could relate to it, relate to the comic better. And Denny and I talked about it, and I said, I don't want to do message comics. And he knew I didn't want to do message comics. I said, well, we have to have these elements in the book. And I said, and we can find a common ground where there's nothing political about it. We can explore the idea, and as long as it's a good story, then everybody's happy. And that's where we went. So I thought, well, what if a character got pregnant? What if it was a character we really care about? And Stephanie Brown was extraordinarily popular at the time. And I thought, well, let's make it Stephanie, because she's kind of from that background. She's from a blue-collar, working-class neighborhood, and she's a year older than Robin, and she's the kind of character that this might happen to. And then we dealt with all the ramifications. And I thought quite fairly. We explored every aspect of teenage pregnancy, without suggesting to the reader one way or the other they should feel.
How did it go over?
It went over well. I mean, we never really heard about it. Just people said that they found the story affecting, and they were moved by it, and what a brave decision she made in the end, and all this stuff. It wasn't until years later that people looked back on it with through the lens of politics, looking through the wrong end of the telescope, and complained about things that I did. But they complained about things in it without looking at the whole context, because they said, she rejected having an abortion and all this stuff. Yeah, well, she also rejected adoption. I wrote a scene where she was just as upset. She felt she was being just as manipulated by some outfit, trying to basically sell her baby. So I said, I showed both sides. And trust me, Denny wouldn't let me get away with not showing both sides.
Jason Boosie, thank you for the super chat. He says, the only place to get comics in small town America when I was a kid was the newsstand. Yeah, I think that's true. Al Bernardi, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Mr. Dixon, your Robin series is my favorite comic of all time. Could you talk about the series overall and the development of Tim and Stephanie?
Well, Stephanie Brown, the spoiler, kind of happened by accident, because Tom Lyle and I were on Detective, and I had this idea, wouldn't it be funny if a supervillain had a teenage kid who rebelled against him. And how would she rebel? She'd become a superhero, you know. See, because you rebel, you got to become the opposite of whatever your parent is. And so Stephanie Brown hates her dad because of what he's done to her mom, and he's just a heel, you know. And he's a second class, you know, half-ass Riddler anyway. I mean, why is he even a supervillain? He can't even come up with an original idea. So she became the spoiler, and she was going to spoil all of the clues that he laid out. And so we did the arc, and we were happy with it. And we never thought about her again. And then the letters came in. This is when we used to actually get letters in the mail. And we got hundreds and hundreds of letters, which, you know, that's a lot of letters for a comic book to get. And it wasn't, we want to see Stephanie Brown again. It was, when are we going to see Stephanie Brown again? And, you know, that's when we realized, okay, we got something by the tail here. And so then I had to start thinking more of fleshing her out as a character and making her more three-dimensional than she was in the original arc. And then a romance between her and Robin just seemed natural. They're hanging out at night together on rooftops. They both have an interest, and they both don't know who each other are, which is kind of cool.
Definitely. Okay, so thank you again, Al. Victor Rod 9669, thank you for the super chat. I'm Hispanic, and Bane's mask, muscles, drew me to him, and I want to be him. I lift weights, and since Dark Knight Rises, I speak like he did on there.
That's funny.
Muscles part's good. Good for you.
Yeah, yeah. The voice, maybe. Yeah, it's not going to go over real. It's not going to go over real good at the drive-through.
Matt, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Chuck, what kind of non-comics related stuff do you like to read?
Boy, a lot of different stuff. I like crime stuff. The problem is, at my age, all my authors are either dead or getting older. The authors that I liked when I was younger, they're like all gone. But, you know, big Elmore Leonard fan, Donald E. Westlake, guys like that, crime stuff. A few years ago, I got into nautical fiction for some reason. I had no real interest in sailing, but I was working on a pirate book, and I kind of got interested in the nautical fiction genre. So I read quite a bit of that. And then I read a whole lot of nonfiction to keep up with what I'm writing. You know, currently reading a lot of stuff about ISIS, because I'm writing a novel about Mosul in Iraq. So, yeah, but I'm a real eclectic reader. I read a lot of different stuff.
You did a lot of Catwoman, didn't you? Did you do the Jim Ballant Catwoman run?
I did. I was like utility Catwoman writer. Like when a Catwoman writer would leave, they would have me write it until they decided on who they wanted to have it do it regular. But I ended up doing like 18 issues over time. But I liked that. It was fun. It was fun. I love that character because she's like the only costume character who likes herself. You know, she doesn't really have any, you know, reason not to. She likes what she's doing, which was a relief. You know, all these angst-ridden heroes.
She's fun. I mean, she enjoys stealing. She likes pretty things.
I love heist stories. I love heist stories. So I got a reason to write them. That was a blessing.
All right, moving off of DC for a second. I gotta hit this real quick because diversity in comics. This comic book made him join the military. He was saying on our live chat that, you know, he was mostly influenced by G.I. Joe, and then Team 7 made him want to go serve his country. And that was your book, wasn't it?
Yeah, me and Aaron Weisenfeld.
Tell me about how that came about.
Jim Lee decided he wanted to do like the background history on his characters at Image, and they all had military backgrounds. And I guess he knew enough from the stuff I had done to know that I would do the homework and be sympathetic to that kind of thing. So, you know, they hired me. The guy, I didn't ever talk to Jim. The guy they had call me said that, you know, we think of you as the Tom Clancy of comics, which I took as a compliment. I was like, well, how dare you? And then they just entirely left me alone. I don't even think I handed in an outline. I just started writing, you know, and Wiesenfeld just kind of knocked it out of the park. And so, you know, I did a few more after that. But the next one was very military oriented. Then the third one was I was involved in some sort of huge crossover I didn't understand. It was a little too super heroic for me. But But they had me back to do Team Zero about some of the characters who were apparently immortal, involved in World War II. So it was fun. It was fun stuff. And then like I said, they left me alone.
I love it. All right, so this is going to pick up another. So I did a long interview with Mark Waid, and Mark Waid told a fascinating story about working at CrossGen with Mark Alessi.
Well, we're going to have two different views on that, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so it's funny because it says, CrossGen, you showed up at March 2002. So 9/11, Mark Waid is talking about how, everybody stopped working, obviously, and Mark Alessi said, everyone go back to work, and Mark Waid was furious. He found this bullying, and he punched a hole in the wall. And it looks like he left CrossGen not too long after that. And you came to CrossGen to pick up some of the books that he left. Is that correct?
It's in part. Now, the way it was told to me, I wasn't there on 9/11. I had been down there for an interview, and then 9/11 happened.
Where were you on 9/11? First of all, what was 9/11 to you? Where were you?
I dropped my youngest was going to a private school, kindergarten, and I dropped him off, and I was listening to Howard Stern on the ride home, and they were talking about a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And at that time, I just thought, well, it's just a private plane, just an accident. And I remember stopping at the small town we lived in to go into the bank. And just before I went in, Stern was like, another plane hit. And I thought, well, this is not an accident. And I remember going home, and my older boy we were homeschooling him at the time. He was awake watching television, and I was trying to explain to him what was going on. And my wife she had a long night the night before, so she was still asleep. And I remember as the first tower came down, thinking, should I go wake her up, or just basically let her have as long a moment as she can before she realizes, like the rest of us, the world has changed. So eventually she came downstairs shortly after that, and saw everything that was going on. But yeah, that's what I remember.
And you were you were still working in DC at this point. Do you remember the book that you were writing when on 9/11?
No, I don't. But I remember. Scott Peterson's going to hate me for telling this story, but I remember my editor, Denny's like assistant editor, he was a full editor at the time. Scott Peterson, great guy, loved working with Scott. He's going to help. I shouldn't tell this, but he calls shortly after the second tower comes down. I pick up the phone. I don't even get to say hello, and he's screaming, "We need to nuke them. We need to nuke them all." And I'm like, this is Scott Peterson. I mean, Scott Peterson and Denny O'Neil were like, politically on the same end of the spectrum. But, he turned into Barry Goldwater for a half hour. And I'm like, I'm trying to calm him down. Yes. Don't worry. We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Real quick, super chat. James, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Chuck, do you know about Bane posting the meme about the plane scene in The Dark Knight Rises? Google it if you don't know. It's weird and hilarious.
Oh, I'll take a look. I do Bane not know that one.
All right, so back to CrossGen. So what happened? What's the real story?
The story as I heard it, I was there for 2 years, was that Mark Alessi had a cousin who was like supposed to be managing everything. And she told everyone to stop watching 9/11 on TV because Mark was coming and he'd be mad. Now, personally, I don't think Mark would have been mad. And personally, I think Mark was late that day because of 9/11. Who could walk away from the TV?
Yeah.
But that's when Mark got mad. And he didn't punch a hole in the wall. He swung the door to his office so hard that the doorknob went through the wall. And that was my office. I took over his office, and they never repaired that hole.
So you just had a big hole left there by Mark Waid.
Mark Alessi would not allow that hole to be repaired. In fact, they put like duct tape around it, like a little frame to protect it.
What was his attitude?
Whose attitude? Mark's?
Mark Alessi.
Yeah, him and Waid were like gasoline and fire. They were never going to get along. And Mark Alessi was a different kind of cat. I liked him. I still like him. He had this magnetic personality, and I think he really wanted to make it work. but he listened to all the wrong people. I went to lunch with him like 2 years ago, and he said, I should have listened to you more, because I would tell him, look, this is the wrong thing to do. I mean, just the stories were great, man. And he and I used to fight. We used to get into screaming matches, but then everything would cool down. I remember one time I did a book called Brath, and it was like our Conan. It was like a Celtic thing set during the Roman era. And I was the one that decided that Brath should be hairy. He shouldn't look like Conan. He should be a hairy guy. Yeah. And when Mark saw the artwork, he called my whole art team into his office, and he was screaming at them. And I came in late that day, and I get this thing over the PA, Chuck Dixon, go to Mark Alessi's office. So I go in, and my team's there. I said, this isn't good. And Mark's yelling at me. He goes, Brath is hairy. And I said, yeah, he's hairy. But he's Scots-Irish. He's a Celt. He can't be hairy. And I said, Mark, I'm 3/4 Scots-Irish and 1/4 Cherokee. Don't make me take my shirt off. I said, because I am one hairy MFer. And he said, get out of my office. Threw me out. And then he kept yelling at the art team after I left.
Oh, man.
But I still like the guy. I mean, I've worked for far worse publishers. And the thing about Alessi was you could go in and talk to him. I couldn't go into any other publisher. I couldn't just walk into Levitz's office and give him crap. But I could do that with Alessi. The door was literally open. So it was different. He made every mistake in the book you could make starting a comic book company. But man, we made some beautiful stuff there.
Why wouldn't he? What about his personality put him at odds with someone like Mark Waid?
I think Alessi would try to tell you what to do, right? And you had to come. You either did what he wanted you to do, and then he would bully you. It was like being in a prison yard, or you resisted. But I think Mark resisted. Waid took it personally and resisted way too hard. So they were just butting heads from the beginning. Me, I would just agree with him and then go do whatever I wanted to do anyway. Because I've got the 80-20. I got the 80-20 rule when it comes to editors. I listen to 100% of what they say, and then I enact 20 of it, just enough to make them happy. And they usually forget the other 80% they ask me to do. So that's how I treated Mark. I mean, when we did El Cazador, our pirate book, which is our best-selling book, I did it without even telling Alessi I was doing it. I pulled Steve Epting off of the book we were working on, and we went to work on a pirate book. And Alessi didn't even know we were doing it till half the artwork was done. Yelling and screaming at me. Why are we doing a pirate book? I said, because we need to do a pirate book. I said, I know in my heart and my soul. Now, Pirates of the Caribbean was going to come out like 6 months later. I said, in my heart and soul, I know we need to do a pirate book. And he says, well, I didn't create this company so you could do what you wanted. I said, you're right. Because if I was doing what I wanted, I'd be writing a Western.
So settle for the pirate book. That's terrific. And it was the best-selling book probably because people went pirate crazy after Pirates of the Caribbean.
Exactly.
How about that?
Exactly.
You're very smart.
Well,
Donna Troy,
I'm lucky every once in a while.
I think you're insightful. I think you kind of you sense the wind, and you're very clever that way. Very smart. Donna Troy, thank you for the super chat. Mr. Dixon, you, Graham, and Alan Grant were my heroes growing up. I always get emotional when I read any of your Batman stories. Thank you so much. Much is capitalized, so she's emotional about it. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Graham, awesome. Alan's a fantastic guy.
So you stayed with CrossGen until the end.
The bitter end. I wasn't there till the bitter end. I was still living in Pennsylvania, like commuting. So I went back up for like the week that they were closed. So Sergio Cariello, if you interview, he can tell you about the final days.
Well, what was it from your experience?
Well, I said when things looked like we were in trouble, I said, well, when we run out of coffee, when they don't buy more coffee for us, that's the end. And like 2 weeks after we ran out of coffee, we were out of business.
Wow.
And Disney came in and bought everything for a song, and but the thing is, we all took home as much as we could before that happened. So a lot of desks disappeared, things like that. Because Alessi had these desks built for the artists that were freaking awesome. They were like animators' desks. They were just wonderful, and all the guys loved them. So
So what was Alessi like in the last days? He wasn't like Hitler in his bunker or anything, was he? Was he running around yelling, or did
Yeah,
you?
yeah. We had a couple of times when he got everybody together just to basically pace back and forth in front of us yelling.
Yeah,
But he didn't know who to blame. He could only blame himself. He got further and further in debt. His financial situation looked good on paper, but it wasn't good.
yeah,
And he expanded too quick. He spent too much money on conventions. He just did everything wrong. And he wouldn't understand. We had a meeting, and Mark doesn't mind me telling this because I'm told, he knows I love the guy. But we had a meeting where we were all there, the writers. Well, we had no editors, but all the writers were there. And he went around the table and said, "What's the future of CrossGen?" And every single one of us said, "We're a genre publisher. We're a genre publisher." And he said, "No, no, it's about the Uber story. It's about the big cosmic story we're telling." And we were like, "No, it's not.
mm,
We have to do genre. We have to do, we're not a superhero company." And that's why El Cazador, the pirate book, sold so well, because readers knew if this company does something in a genre, they're going to do it earnestly. If they do a spy book, it's going to be a real spy book. It's going to have everything you want in that kind of story. And a pirate book's going to have everything you want in that kind of story. And they trusted us. That's where they trusted us. And he didn't understand that.
yeah. I remember going to conventions when with CrossGen. Being there, I guess I was working at DC at the time, and CrossGen had these enormous booths. They wanted to compete
Yeah.
with DC and Marvel, and they were showing off. And I remember Mark Alessi showing. I remember something about a basketball. I can't remember what that incident was, but there was something where he was just basically saying he's going to be as big, or he is already as big as
Yeah.
Marvel and DC, and like they were just laughing at him. And the other thing that I remember that there was this whole thing where people were saying to me, like, this isn't the way to run a company. Like, he's showing off. He shouldn't be doing this. He doesn't have the money to do this. He's going to drive the company to the ground. Now, that was fine. But for me, from an artist perspective, I'm watching the artists sit there at the booths, and Alessi was cracking a whip. If you were one
Yeah.
of his artists, you had to sit there, and they had ready-made sketch paper, and you had to draw for free whatever the people waiting for you in line asked for.
Yep.
His policy was basically to make his artists do slave labor at the whim of fans who weren't necessarily buying the books. There was absolutely no reason to put his fans at this, or put his artists at the service of fans the way that they were. I mean, it was slavery. And and the other thing was, I remember going and looking over somebody's shoulder, and they were drawing the Thing, and I was like, they're not even drawing like cross-gen characters for these people.
Yeah. That was a mistake. Bringing everybody to every convention was a mistake.
Mm,
There was just so much that went wrong with it. And I told him that. I said, you can't be Marvel or DC. They've got 70 years of history behind, but there's a great underserved reading public that we can own, and we don't even have to sell that many comics to be profitable. But he wouldn't listen. He was going to crush them.
pride.
Yeah, and we were always waiting for that next movie deal. And of course, he hired people to work on movies, to get us movie deals, who had no interest in getting movie deals for us. They were basically picking up a paycheck and using this as an entree to schmooze their way through Hollywood. And they didn't do a damn thing for any of us.
Yeah.
So it's and it was always just hang with me another month and everything will turn around. And we had interest. I remember Frank Darabont wrote a screenplay for Way of the Rat that was brilliant, but we just, it was at DreamWorks, and it just hung there until the company went out of business.
Nostalgia and criticism. Thank you so much for the very generous super chat. Wow. Mr. Dixon, thank you so much for being a pioneer and giving us great works that could be called masterpieces today. I am and always will be a fan. I'm glad to be giving you this message tonight. Again, thank you.
I feel like putting a paper bag over my head. Oh my God. That's too great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
People are really glad to see you. And by the way, this is the second biggest turnout that I think I've ever had, besides the Diversity in Comics live chat a few days.
Yeah. I can understand that. Yeah.
Which was super controversial. Everybody wanted to watch that. But yeah, big turnout. All right, so back to DC Comics after that, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, for a little while. I sort of my leaving CrossGen. That was sort of my wilderness period. You know, I wasn't getting a lot of work, and you know, it came in fits and starts. You know, Marv Wolfman got me some work somewhere one time. Tom DeFalco got me a little bit of work here and there. And then I was back at DC for a very short while for a run on Batman: The Outsiders and Robin, and then gone again.
What happened?
I to this day I don't know. I just know that my editor was crying when he told me he had to fire me. But I never got a reason why. I mean, I was never told to rewrite anything. I was never told they were unhappy. You know, I don't think sales fell. You know, I don't know. I don't know what happened. It kept me awake for a long time at nights. I couldn't sleep because I'm like, why?
You've done so much.
Yeah, I don't know. But you know, it was a tough period financially as well as creatively. I wanted to work, and I saw all the guys I work with at CrossGen go on to be even bigger than they were before they went to CrossGen. I was like, but I can't work with them. You know, they've gone away. So I mean, that's basically what led me to turn to write novels, because I had to fill in my time somehow, make some money.
And so, what was the first novel that you wrote?
I wrote a book called Bad Times, Cannibal Gold. It's a time travel series.
With cannibals?
Yeah, prehistoric cannibals.
Oh, sweet.
So,
That sounds like fun.
then I started the Levon Cade series, and that's been my bestseller. That actually, you know, pays the bills. So
Who publishes you?
me, I do it through Amazon, and it all belongs to me. When Hollywood calls, they only have to talk to me. You know, it's worked out really well for me.
That's magnificent. That's absolutely terrific. So, all right, so let's just zoom ahead a little bit and let's talk about what's going on right now. We've got a guy named Vox Day, who is a pretty hard right winger. He's a kind of brand new kind of right winger, maybe to the right of even you and me. And he has decided in this day and age, where comic books seem to, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for Chuck here, in this day and age where it seems like comic books have taken a hard left turn towards social justice. And social justice is a nice thing. I mean, it's a nice phrase that sounds good. I mean, people say, well, how could you be against social justice? Well, no, everybody's for social justice. It's the term sounds nice, and it doesn't really describe what it actually is. There's a lot of that in comics. It seems to be the reason that a lot of people are saying comics are now declining. Comics are on the decline. So out of the blue, here comes this fellow named Vox Day, who I guess has been a columnist. He's a musician. He's exactly like Charles Manson. That was for you, Vox. And he's got an idea. He's got a plan, man, and he's going to do comics just like SJW comics. They're going to be political agitation. He's got a character named Alt Hero who wears a Confederate flag, which is timed with the the sort of public reaction to the Confederate flag kind of being a symbol of racism and the Old South. Confederate flags are no longer okay socially. I mean, that's just something that happened last year, 2 years ago, and kind of everybody's kind of gone along with it, but not Vox Day. So he gets a Kickstarter together to fund this comic book, and he raises $250,000 inexplicably, many through big, gigantic donations. And I think he's kept his ear to the ground, and he's heard about you, Chuck.
Yes, he did.
He offered you some work. So tell me how that went down.
Well, I heard from him. I'm not sure how I heard from him at first, but then we ended up talking on the phone. And he asked if I wanted to come work with him to do a series of 48-page books, like 48-page books, that he would then put on the Kickstarter thing. And, as a, what do they call it? A stretch goal. And I told him what I needed and what my approach would be, and how I don't mind being edited, but I mostly want to be left alone on the creative end. And I wasn't interested in doing books that were political. I didn't want them to be screeds. but they would reflect my life view, but not tell anybody what to think. And he was fine with it. And I wanted to be free of the kind of concerns I would have working for another company where I would have to be politically correct. I would have to be diverse for the sake of diversity, that kind of thing. And you know, he said, no, that's fine. That's what he was looking for. You know, that basically he was doing the book that was going to take all the, you know, slings and arrows. But, you know, if I wanted to do just straight ahead superhero adventure set in the universe he created. And that's where we started, and then it turned into, you know, more books and, you know, more involvement. And that's where we stand. The artist is working on the second book now, and it's going to the first book's going to the colorist, and then you know, just a few weeks ago he brought up the idea of adapting P.G. Wodehouse into comic book form, not knowing that I'm a longtime Wodehouse fan, and he teamed me with Gary Quapis, who I've worked with for 30 years and never knew was a Wodehouse fan. And we're adapting Right Ho Jeeves, which should have a huge audience overseas for this stuff in Germany and India and England, and, you know, here too, but mostly overseas. And you know, so like all the editors I used to like working with, he has faith in me, and he's letting me do what I want. So it's kind of irresistible, and he's paying on time.
He is.
Yes, he is. He is paying on time. Well, it's a reduced rate against participation in back end, but I've been doing that for years. Hell, I worked for Dynamite for a while, so I don't have any pride.
We just did a tour of Dynamite Studios, a video that just came out this morning. So everybody listening, please check that out as well, if you're interested in the inside of an independent comic book company. So what do you think? Do you think he's going to succeed?
I think project by project, we'll have to see what happens. It's certainly he's got different ideas. He's got ideas that don't come from comics, which is a good thing sometimes. And he hasn't said anything that I've said, you know, you're completely wrong. You know, you're completely wrong. And he seeks my guidance all the time. He's always picking my brain. Do you think this is right? Because he doesn't know, you know, the names of creators. He doesn't know. You know, it's like anybody else who comes into this business from outside. He's like, oh, this guy's a genius. Well, they don't know he never turns anything in on time. You know, they don't know he's fallen down drunk 6 months out of the year. He's a manic depressive or whatever. You know, it's like I used to tell Alessi, 98% of the guys here are self-starters. You're the luckiest son of a bitch that ever started a comic book company, because all these guys know how. Every guy you hire knows how to meet a deadline. That's like against the laws of probability, but you did it somehow, you know, without knowing. And but that's, you know, but those are the kinds of, you know, nuts and bolts, meat and potato stuff that Box and I talk about, that he seeks my advice on.
Well, that's the thing that I wanted to ask. That's the connection. So do you think that Vox Day is a second chance at guiding Mark Alessi? How are they the same? How are they different?
I don't really see any similarities. You know, he's not demanding my loyalty or anything like that. He's not making big, ridiculous promises. He's not running the company on wishful thinking. He's waiting to see where all this takes us, which is the way comics have been from the beginning. I mean, let's face it, Superman was published to fill 8 pages. You know, they didn't have any plans for Superman. It all happened by accident. You know, that's the way comics happen. You throw it against the wall and see what happens. But we're throwing enough different stuff against the wall, something will stick. And he's leaving his creators alone. He's you know, he's letting us do what we do. And you know, you spin the wheel, take a chance, you know. So yeah, I mean, he's not talking about having 17 books by next year, taking on DC and Marvel or anything else. He's about serving this underserved niche.
I'm excited about it. I got to be honest with you. As much as I think he's nuts, like, I really am excited about what he's doing. I think he's
Well, you got to be a little nuts to get into comics. You know, you've heard the old saying: you want to make $2 million in comics, start with $1
million. Yeah, I think he's eccentric, and I think there's something in the air right now that rewards
eccentric. You know, all the greats in comics have been eccentrics.
Yeah, totally. It rewards ballsiness, and it rewards BS. There's something in the air in all ways that just sort of will accept the underdog and let the underdog win right now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like, I just see him kind of riding that crest against all odds and against me saying, look, both of these books that I've seen so far are really bad. And I see him going, you know what, F you, but then fixing the books the next time around and turning out to be a pretty successful publisher. He says he wants to be the 5th or 6th biggest publisher, biggest company in comics within 3 years. And
well,
if he
that's more
lasts
mature.
3
That's
years,
more mature than saying you want to be number 3 or number 2. You got to admit,
yeah,
he's not. And then a lot of this is stealth. I mean, he's got an enormous fan base. That's most of it is outside of comics, but they respond to what he does. So he's got the mojo.
yes, he does, just like Charles Manson. So, I mean, let's hope that turns out.
Well,
to be
he hasn't asked me to visit anybody's house in the middle of the night yet, so I'll let you know if that ever happens.
If he does, please let us here at Comic Artist Pro Secrets know. That's the kind of scoop we're looking for. All right, so you know what? Thank you, Chuck. I'm going to turn it over to questions now, if you don't mind, for the last half hour.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So number one Marmaduke fan, thanks for the super chat. In Bane Conquest, Bane roasted old derelict communist buildings. Thoughts on the anti-commie themes in that series? Maximum respect.
Well, I'm an anti-commie. I take any chance I can to, cack a commie in one of my comics. So I got no problems with that. I mean, when I used to work with Kat Ironwood, who is a commie, she'll tell you herself. I used to, if I wanted to have Skywolf punch a commie, I wrote in that he shot him. so then I always knew she would say, well, what if he just, punched him? Okay.
All right, Miller number 1, thank you for the super chat. Huge thank you for creating Stephanie Brown, my fave. Did you read her as Batgirl? Any stories you would write for her now? Do you have a Gotham map?
Well, I helped draw the Gotham map, at least the one used in the 90s, because I named so many of the places that had never been named before. And as far as Stephanie Brown being Robin, my original intention, one of the reasons I left DC when I did was because I had proposed that Blue Beetle, who I wrote as having a terminal disease, terminal illness, would hire Tim Drake to be the new Blue Beetle, which was a better fit for Tim Drake than Robin, actually. And there would be a Blue Beetle miniseries with Tim Drake as Blue Beetle. And during that miniseries, Stephanie Brown would have stepped in as Robin. But they kept nixing it. And I thought, this is just too wonderful an idea. I don't understand why you can't see it. You would it's 2 birds with 1 stone. You could make Blue Beetle into a big selling book. And, you'd have a female Robin for the second time. But, they didn't see it. And it was one of the things that made me want to leave and go to CrossGen, because I just creatively felt I was being stifled. Not to sound too artsy-fartsy about it.
Let's see. We got some Vox Day people in here. Matthew King says EVS is a lying goon. Disgusting. Come on, Matthew, stop it.
I've always known that about you.
Oh, look, here's some more. David the Good. Where did Vox hurt you, Chubbs? David.
What?
Shaming. Yeah, calling me Chubbs.
Jeez.
All right. EVS, if you haven't already, ask Chuck about him being responsible for the most dialogue in comic book history. Let's call Guinness.
The most pages. Yeah. My statistician, the Reverend Jared, he did the compilation. He looked back on everything that I'd written and realized that I had passed the Guinness Book of World Records for number of comic book pages written. And it was in the middle of Bane Conquest number 5. I hit page 40,000.
Yeah.
So I passed Paul S. Newman, who used to write for Dell. Most fans don't even know who he is because his name never appeared in any comics.
Yeah.
But we've yet to make it official.
Some more Vox Day people are angry that I called Vox Day Charles Manson. They're calling me a piggy, which I think proves my point.
You're going to get a visit in the middle of the
night. John Coates says, tell the funny story about an anti-Reagan poster in Airboy comic and thought you were a commie because of it.
Well, yeah, in an early issue of Airboy, I was the artist was Tom Yates, and Tom Yates is Southern California hippie lefty, And part of the story was about this Central American dictator, fictitious Central American dictator, who looked like Emilio Fernandez. And in one of the scenes, Tom took it upon himself to have a framed photo of Ronald Reagan in the dictator's office. And it said something like, much love, Ronnie. And we got all these letters, and claiming that I was a commie, this big commie. Yeah. It's like, well, man, nothing could be further from the truth. But it was fun for months. You get these angry letters. This tempest in a teapot over Tom's little addition.
It's good to know they're out there, right? I mean,
yeah.
All right, Hazarar, thank you for the super chat. Do you sometimes think the simplistic text boxes distracts from the art? Personally, I find it annoying to have a white and black blob over such great art.
Well, if it's distracting you, then they didn't place the word balloon properly. I mean, it's part of the art. It's part of the comic, and it has to be incorporated into the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I object when there's too much wordage, but it should be a balance between words and pictures. I mean, that's the medium.
Yeah, I mean, you got to. The chat is going absolutely nuts right now. People are saying helter skelter. I'm getting cursed out by Box Days people. Come on now, guys. I love Box Day. We're buddies. EVS Dixon, will the fans get a reprint of the Red Robin series? Either of you can answer. I don't know the answer to that. So
I don't know the answer to that. Who is Red Robin? I mean, I know there's a character Red Robin. Is that Tim Drake? I don't know.
I think I think that's Tim Drake. Okay. In the Teen Titans.
Okay.
I think with wings now. He's got like bird wings, which is.
Yeah, I hate to break everybody's heart, but I don't read every comic book that comes out.
Me neither. Just can't. Ryan English, thank you for the super chat. I'm getting into comics for the first time at age 36. Is there anything in your body of work you're most proud of that you'd point me to?
Find the original Winter World. It's available in hardcover from IDW. It's a story by me, artwork by Jorge Zafino. And it's early in my career, but it's a huge highlight. Also, probably Batman meets Punisher by me and John Romita Jr. And then recently, I did a book with Graham Nolan called Joe Frankenstein. It's available also in hardcover from IDW. That's a lot of fun. So those three of all of the 40,000 pages I've written, I'm picking those three out for you.
Okay. Craig S. says, what does Chuck think about Robert Kirkman's writing and his character Invincible?
I don't know anything about it. I know he's a very lucky man.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, listen, he had this one idea, like zombie movies end too soon. What happens after the zombie movie? And
yeah,
boy, $1 billion idea.
And it's all on him because the book is a publishing phenomenon even before it came on television. I mean, more people buy that, I think, regularly than any other book, right? I mean, I've heard sales figures on the trade paperbacks that I had to read a couple of times to even believe they're that big.
Well,
he's huge.
Have you read any Walking Dead?
Yeah. My youngest son's devoted to it. So we have all those big oversized hardbacks, and I've read about half of them. And then he reads ahead, and then my wife keeps bugging him about what happens next. So,
let's see. Chuck, will Arkhaven? Here's another Box Day guy. Chuck, will Arkhaven give you the greatest creative liberty of any group you've ever worked with?
Well, equal to like working with Denny O'Neill or Archie Goodwin, which is about as much creative freedom as you get. I mean, Box is going to tell me if I'm screwing up. You always need somebody else to look at the work. But so far, he's letting me go. I'm having a blast telling the story. I mean, the coolest thing about it is it's superheroes, but there is no continuity. I'm creating it as I go along. So literally anything can happen. I'm free of the illusion of change that you have to use when you're working with standard established superheroes. I mean, I can do anything I want with them, which it's a lot of fun. It's the first time for me on a book like this.
Discount Geek says, hey, Chuck, I absolutely love your G.I. Joe run. I'm wondering that if given the chance, would you actually make Tim Drake the Blue Beetle like how you wanted to do when you were on Birds of Prey?
Yeah, it'd be fun. I think he's a good fit because he's like a techno geek and all that stuff. He's actually a better fit as Blue Beetle.
True Bag Pipe Rock is making fun of how fat I am, and he says Vox will pay EVS in KFC buckets. Well, Vox didn't make that offer to me, True Bag Pipe Rock, because I love KFC, and I probably would have drawn his silly comic book had he made that offer to me, but no. Hey guys, this is from Logan Cook. Love your guys' work. Do either of you have any advice on how to break into comics or get a portfolio review?
Well, first, write a big hit movie.
So that helps. That really helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
Look,
does.
yeah, portfolio review. I will tell you this, Logan. The key to breaking into comics is never. I mean, you can, if you want to break in, you need to show your portfolio to an editor, and you got to catch them at a convention, and they don't want to look at your portfolio, so you've got to get them under the right circumstances and butter them up somehow. Your best bet is to make friends with a writer. Especially a writer who is new and inexperienced. A lot of writers out there right now who are also trying to break into comics are looking for a guy like you who will draw their stories for free. And once you've teamed up, I mean, this is basically what happened to Robert Kirkman and his artist, is that, you know, they teamed up together and they pitched a project together. They got it done, and that's kind of how it works.
That's excellent advice. It is.
Yeah. Hey, EVS, I'm on an iPad, so I can't give super chats, but can you please ask Mr. Dixon if he has any stories about his days at Now Comics? Was a big fan of that publisher back in the day. Thanks.
Yeah, Now Comics was Tony Caputo out of Chicago. And yeah, he had some crazy ideas too, but he stopped paying after a while. And I did a series for him called Alias, and Alias, it was I was working with two friends of mine on the artwork, and we worked way ahead of schedule. And he stopped paying us, so we never handed in the last 3 issues because he hadn't paid. And so no one knew how the story ended. And he managed to get interest in Hollywood in it. And again, this is weird. Frank Darabont wrote the screenplay for Alias, but he was writing it, but he didn't know how I ended the story. So he called me, and I never heard of Frank. Nobody heard of Frank Darabont at that point. He'd only written like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. And he calls me and says, "How's the story end?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you because I didn't get paid. I'm not going to tell anybody." And he says, "Come on, tell me how it ended." I said, "No, you get that son of a bitch to pay me, and I'll tell you. I'll tell you the end."
That's what that's where the money is. I mean,
yeah. And the thing is, they were going to go ahead with the movie. It was going to star Nicolas Cage, Gene Hackman. They were 2 months away from principal photography, and they pulled the plug because at that time they didn't think Nicolas Cage could carry a movie.
Well, they're not wrong, but I mean, he's carried a few.
He carries he carries it in his own way.
Yes, he's dropped more than he's carried. But listen, he did Raising Arizona and Wild at Heart. That's, you know, he can.
But he's always fun to watch, even in a piece of crap. So.
Totally. President KP, thank you for the super chat. Mr. Dixon, you're awesome. Loving Bane Conquest. It's one of my favorite books right now. Thanks for sticking it to the liberals with the Clinton book.
Well, you're very welcome. I'd already burnt my bridges, so I was free to do that.
All right, let's see here. Are there a lot of people? Are they still cursing me out? I can't tell. Wait.
Well, yeah. Well, you still get in trouble.
Yeah. All right. So, Mikra, what is Chuck's favorite book? Mikra asks, what is Chuck's favorite book out today? Sorry if that was already asked. Kind of zoned out during the EVS Vox chat war. I'm so sorry. It wasn't me. I just said some stuff. They're the ones who started the war.
Seriously.
I just finished it.
You just had some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite book out currently. I don't really read current comics. I mean, I see stuff every now and then. I'm reading a graphic novel from Lion Forge now called Ghosts of Gaudi that's really good. But I think it's a Spanish graphic novel translated to English. But that's like the most current thing I've read recently.
Wasteley says, Chuck, do you have opinions on the politics of various superheroes and villains?
Yeah, that always gets discussed. Yeah, you can sort of figure out. Graham and I had a big argument when we first started working on Batman together over whether or not Batman was a Catholic or a Protestant. So Graham won. He's a Catholic because the guilt that he suffers. He's got to be a Catholic. So I think in your mind, and of course, every writer assigns a different political viewpoint, to the same character as they work on them because they kind of make it their own.
Yeah, it's good that a few have been established in stone, though. I mean, Hal Jordan is a Republican, so is Hawkman, a conservative anyway, and Barry Allen is armored.
Yeah, as long as they're in the hands of someone who knows how to write a conservative.
Oh my God, that's so true. Jeff Myers, thanks for the super chat. How does it feel to have created Bane, one of the most iconic Bat villains since his rock-solid Rogues Gallery was set decades ago? It's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lifelong Batman fan, and it still can't get my head around the fact that, basically Graham and I added a permanent member to the Rogues Gallery. I can't, it's obviously going to be what I'm remembered for.
There's a silly question here. Hey, Chuck, does Trump steal his speeches from Bane, or is it the other way around?
They sort of have the same delivery.
They do. Oh my God. I think there was a whole thing about that, like where somebody gave Trump a speech that was kind of ripped from Dark Knight Rises. And,
well, there was a lot of Bane spoke a lot of political cliches in Dark Knight Rises, and whenever they write a speech for Trump, it's full of the same cliches. So you're gonna cross paths there.
You have to, yeah. I would just go out and deliver his speech directly. I would just take straight from the movie.
Yeah, make people's heads explode.
Yeah. A lot of people would be like, look, compare these side by side. Can't you see?
And then ride through Goldman Sachs on a motorcycle.
I can see that. Diversity, inclusion, compassion, kindness in comics, Dick in comics. What are Chuck's thoughts on the tragic canceling of America, which is, the America comic book, which was okay, and then Iceman, when Iceman had his book as a gay man, and what changes would he make to Squirrel Girl to make it bulletproof?
Well, I don't know enough about Squirrel Girl, but I have seen enough of America to know if the cancellation came because it's just an awful book. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And then Iceman being gay, hey, create your own character to be gay. I'm not against the characters being gay, but why do you got to change a character that was established as a womanizer from day one? It's like, why not make Ben Grimm a cross-dresser just for the hell of it? It's like you can get a story out of this stuff. I mean, every year when Lucy would pull the football away from Charlie Brown, well, what if one year he killed her? It'd be a great story, but it's a story that should never be told.
Right.
I mean, it's just not a good idea just for the sake of a story. So, and the thing is, it's like, oh, Iceman's gay. It's like, is this supposed to like stop the world spinning? I mean, don't you have some other way to promote this stuff that people actually care about, like doing a good comic?
True Bag Pipe Rock is still angry with me about Box Day. He says, calling people Manson. Only war EVS could finish is with a buffet. What is the fat stuff? I'm not that fat.
Wow.
What the hell?
Wow.
Icy cold. Listen, I'm sorry. But see, the thing about it is that as they're getting angry and ganging up, like this is exactly what like Squeaky Frome would have done. You know what I mean? like that's all I can think. Like I can picture Squeaky Frome, and I'm just like, listen.
Watch out for chicks in red hoodies.
That's all I'm saying.
You don't go out on that greeting line. Stay away from that greeting line.
Fox needs a symbol. We have to create a symbol for him so that these guys can carve on the foreheads. I'll do it. Let's see. Hey, Chuck, loved Alien Legion. Were the characters based on people you knew?
No, not really. I can't, because they're all pretty weird. No, I just tried to come up with the strangest looking characters, that really looked alien. Because I didn't like, the idea of Star Trek where they're all human. They just have funny heads.
Yeah. Recrudescent Piton, what a great name. Thanks for the super chat. Winter World TV still happening? Will there be more comics?
They assure me that the Winter World thing is still in play out there, but the comics will come when the TV show comes. So, one hand washes the other. So My friends at IDW say they still have a lot invested in it, and they still want to make it happen. So these things take forever.
Yeah, somebody said the Charlie Brown thing actually made me laugh out loud. Let's see, some projection going on here, mates. They don't know who Squeaky Frome is, says poor, I can't pronounce his name. Poor phyrogenitus. That's probably a great word. I need to look that up and figure out what it means. But yeah, he's probably right. Let's see, that people are saying that I'm getting rocked, and somebody's saying he's dishing it right back out. Well, you guys have to knock it off. I mean, for real, calling someone Charles Manson is not that big a deal when you guys are all surrounding him and protecting him. That just makes sense. And then you guys call me Jim Jones right back, and I just go, okay, I wish I was Jim Jones. That would be just fine. But Jim Jones was a Democrat. And that's not me. Wesley asks, when can we look for his Castelia House books like Woodhouse?
Very soon. It's up for the Kindle's up for pre-order on Amazon on the first issue now, and the print edition should follow shortly after. So in a few weeks, you can have it on your Comixology, your Kindle, whatever, your right. Digital comic. So
yeah. John Delarose says Woodhouse is out on the on January 29th.
There you go.
So it's a very good thing. Well, I want to thank you, Chuck, for coming here and not defending me against these people. You
don't need anybody to defend you.
I definitely do. I've got the Manson family after me now.
Well, I'll be like John Wayne outside Robert Ryan's house. I'll stand in your driveway and make sure nobody hurts you.
Please do. I don't want to wake up to like Helter Skelter written in semen on my wall, which is I think what might be happening tomorrow with these people. Somebody says the Green Lantern's light will protect you. Well, God bless. I think that's true. Paul Dozier, thank you for the super chat. No question. I just love these interviews. Thanks, Uncle Ethan. Wonderful. Chuck, you were great. You were very entertaining, charming, a great guest. And from all of my many guests here, my many viewers, and there are many, many, many people watching right now, and there will be many more when this gets published onto my YouTube page. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, guys. Thank you all very, very much. And we will see you tomorrow night for the Bill Corbett from MST3K live chat. And that'll be fun as well. And you all have a great night. Bye-bye.